Need a little luxury in your life? That's why I recently treated myself to a staycation at the Inn at 500 Capital. Whether you're looking for a romantic getaway, a special celebration, or just a break from routine, you're going to love their Four Diamond Boutique experience with gorgeous rooms, penthouses, and suites right in the heart of downtown Boise. You'll be greeted with a complimentary drink on arrival, have access to free shuttle service, and even your pet is welcome. And here's an insider tip: book more than one night and save with their weekend escape rate. Book your stay now at inat500.com. Today on CityCast Boise. This legislative session saw a record-breaking wave of anti-LGBTQ bills, with attacks on access to healthcare and even a push to roll back marriage equality. For LGBTQ Idahoans, the message is clear and terrifying. We're diving into what's driving this legislation, what it means for our community, and what comes next in the fight for equality. It's Thursday, March 27th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me today is Misty Deli Carpini-Tolman, the State Director for Planned Parenthood. Thank you so much for being here today, Misty.
Thank you for having me, Lindsay. I'm really excited to be here.
The very first bill this legislative session was House Joint Memorial 1, which says that the Idaho legislature rejects the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in the case of Oberfeld versus Hodges and calls on the U.S. Supreme Court to, quote, restore the natural definition of marriage, a union of one man and one woman, end quote. What kind of a message did the legislature send with that memorial?
It's funny because we always say that the first bill kind of sets the tone for the entire session, and this held so true this year. This was the very first bill that was introduced, and I think it speaks volumes to the fact that the Idaho legislature is making it clear that rolling back LGBTQ rights is a top priority for them. It's a direct attack on marriage equality, sends a chilling message to our community that their love and their families and their right to exist openly and equally are up for debate, treated as if they're less worthy, less valid, less deserving of the dignity and protections that every family should have. And it also, signals to national extremist groups that Idaho's a testing ground for extreme anti-LGBTQ policies.
And when this memorial was introduced, and even as it worked its way through the legislature, different groups would say, well, this memorial doesn't have the ability to become a law. So, maybe I'm not saying this is how I felt, but different groups said, it's not that big a deal. It's just a memorial. Why is everyone getting worked up about this? But in your perspective, even though this memorial couldn't become a law, what kind of a weight did it carry?
Yeah, you're right. So the memorial doesn't carry the force of law behind it, but moves like this are a dangerous, dangerous rallying cry. It emboldens extremists and can lay the groundwork for future legal challenges. It sends a devastating message to the queer community in Idaho that their rights are conditional and their relationships are fragile and just kind of subject to the whims of politicians who refuse to see their love as equal. It fuels fear and uncertainty in the community, making people question whether their marriages will have the legal protections or even if their place in Idaho is secure. And frankly, it wastes a lot of precious legislative time on attacks instead of addressing real issues that Idahoans care about, like education and housing and healthcare.
And Idaho isn't the only state that passed one of these memorials. Several states recently passed similar memorials or resolutions. Do you think that those could potentially set the stage for the Supreme Court to revisit the Obergefell decision? Like, could they claim it's public outcry or a referendum on their previous decision?
Absolutely. And really what it feels like is that this Supreme Court is not the Supreme Court of a decade ago. And we've seen them overturn precedent before. Roe v. Wade is a clear example with the Dobbs decision. And if enough states pass similar memorials or resolutions, kind of all at the same time, extremists could frame it as a public outcry and push SCOTUS to reconsider marriage equality. I mean, I think we have to take very seriously Justice Thomas's explicit call in Dobbs for the court to revisit Obergefell. It makes it feel like this isn't just a hypothetical threat. This is something they're actually thinking about.
And Misty, you've been married to your wife for a while. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a personal question. How could a reversal of that decision or kicking the issue of marriage equality back to the states impact your family?
Yeah, so my wife and I have built a life together over the past 7 years. And to us, our marriage isn't just a ceremony that we had in a park with our children or a piece of paper. It's truly the foundation of our family and the legal protections that ensure we can care for each other in sickness and in health, and the security that our love and commitment mean something in the eyes of the law. I recently battled breast cancer, and I can't imagine how much harder that would have been had my wife not been able to be by my side, helping me make medical decisions that would affect the rest of our lives. So if marriage equality were overturned, states like Idaho could refuse to recognize our marriage, stripping us of our rights overnight. And the idea that my ability to make medical decisions for my wife if she were to get sick, or vice versa if I get sick again, to have our kids on her health insurance, to continue building the safe and sacred foundation that we've been trying to for our children and our family, to feel confident that our family will always be together, that could just be erased by politicians overnight is gut-wrenching. Heather Scott even said recently, and she was the sponsor of the marriage memorial, she said she can see two men in love, living together, built a life together, but that she still doesn't have to believe that they're married, like, I don't know, they're Santa Claus or something. And she called our community an abomination. So no family should have to live with that fear that one court ruling or one election or one extremist lawmaker could rip away the life that they've built. But that's exactly what's at stake. And it's terrifying to think that our dignity and security and the most personal parts of our lives are up for debate in a legislature that sees us as second-class citizens.
I really appreciate you letting us have a glimpse into how this personally affects you, because I think we can all read the bills, we can all, decide how we feel about them or the impact that we think they have, but this is your life. This is your family that we're discussing. This isn't just some abstract concept or abstract bill. So thank you so much for letting us have that glimpse into your life and the impact that these bills have.
Of course, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of help humanize these bills and let people see that we are more than just words on paper, and how it'll affect our actual day-to-day lived experiences.
And as you mentioned, House Joint Memorial 1 was just the first in what has felt like an avalanche of anti-LGBTQ legislation this session. In fact, this session has had the most anti-LGBTQ bills in Idaho's history, correct?
Yes, this is the most anti-LGBTQ session that we've had in the history of the state.
How many bills have been proposed so far?
Yeah, so including different versions of bills, there have been 24 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced, targeting everything from healthcare to education to basic freedoms. I can't even begin to describe to you how awful it's been for the queer community when hit after hit keeps coming and you don't know what it's going to be until it gets printed. So you just live with that anxiety and fear from the second you see it on the agenda until you see the terrible language of the bill. And so it just feels like every second of the legislative session, you're just living on the precipice of disaster and wondering, is it going to happen today? Is it going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen? And it feels like such an onslaught. And so I think it's really important to count every version of legislation to help capture what it's like to be LGBTQ plus right now in Idaho during this legislative session, being attacked day after day. And it's not accidental. right? It's part of a coordinated national push to erase LGBTQ people from the public life.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing up that uncertainty that exists throughout the session. This idea of, yeah, is the bill going to move? Is it going to be tabled? Do you need to testify? Is it a waiting game at this point? Like, there is a lot of uncertainty that just adds to the stress of the legislative session when it's your humanity and your family that they're discussing. So why do you think there is all of this anti-LGBTQ legislation right now?
Yeah, you're exactly right when you name like how burdensome that becomes, because it's not just the queer community, right? It feels like most people know and love someone who's part of the community, and that the stress is showing up in their lives now too. My very sweet LDS sister sent us the sweetest note once she heard about the marriage memorial and wanted to know if there was like a petition she could sign or what she could do. She doesn't live in the state, so she was trying to see what she could do. And so, the stress reached all the way across the country to where she's living. It's a really unmanageable day-to-day situation to live in. And I think that it's so clear that extremists in the Idaho legislature have been emboldened by a couple things. I think they've been emboldened by the Dobbs decision. So they see an opportunity to undo decades of progress. And I think they are also emboldened by the current administration, because how many times this session have we heard elected officials use like, well, the administration's already doing this, or the administration has indicated that they're going to do this as a way to like legitimize the legislation that they're running. I also think that Idaho is being used as a testing ground for laws that other states will try to replicate. It used to be that Idaho would just kind of sit back and be content copying other terrible states' bills. But with the emboldening that's happened, it's like it's given them free rein to be in this race to just be like the number one worst state in the country. And the politicians who are pushing these bills aren't using actual data or facts. They're using fear-mongering and misinformation to distract Idahoans from actual real issues. And so I think all of these things kind of compound to make this snowball that's just getting bigger as it's rolling down the hill.
Hey, it's Haley Steinfeld. When everything requires your attention, it can be tough to figure out what to prioritize. But I'm here to talk to you about something that you should always put first: your breast health. In fact, if you're 40 and over, you should be getting screened once a year. And if you're under 40, it's never too soon to visit yourattentionplease.com to learn about your breast cancer risk. So go on, pay the girls some attention and take the time to find out your breast cancer risk at yourattentionplease.com. Trust me, your future self will thank you.
Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse April 3rd, only on Netflix.
What are some of the bills that are most concerning to you, or that you feel have the potential to impact the LGBTQ community here the most?
It feels impossible to pick the worst bills this session because there's just been so many attacks in different and deeply harmful ways. And like we talked about before, they don't just exist in isolation. So like think about banning trans people from public spaces while also allowing medical providers to deny them care, and the ways that that could like play off of each other to create like an even more dangerous situation. I think a few of the most damaging bills moving through the legislature are the trans bathroom and facilities ban with a bounty. which would bar trans people from using bathrooms and dorms that align with their gender, pushing them further into the margins of public life and creating really unsafe spaces for them.
What would this dorm and public bathroom bill look like in practice? You mentioned a bounty. What would that look like in day-to-day life when people are trying to use the bathroom?
So at universities, correctional facilities, it would force trans people to use the bathroom of the sex that they were assigned at birth. So picture, a trans man going into the woman's bathroom, or a trans woman being forced into the men's bathroom. I think that it sets up universities and businesses for impossible enforcement dilemmas, because they're the ones who carry the weight of the lawsuit. But it's the danger that they're setting trans people up for, to have to be forced into these spaces that they don't belong. It's not about safety. It's about control. There's zero evidence that these bans prevent harm, and there's plenty of evidence that they cause harm.
I mean, I've seen videos from around the country where, if a woman has very short hair or, a very square jawline, they're being questioned about what is their gender, what is their sex. It seems like it complicates the issue of, we're just trying to use the bathroom and go about our day. Are there any mechanisms to ensure that people aren't just being harassed when they're trying to use the bathroom?
There are no provisions in the bill to prevent bad actors from harassing people, which is obviously a concerning measure, because it could lead to predatory behavior on, trans people, women and girls. I think it's just it's a mess of a bill, and it is sending such a dangerous message.
What are some of the other harmful bills that have been working their way through the Idaho legislature or have made it and are now law?
Yeah, so the other big one for me is the medical discrimination bill, HB 59, which was signed by Governor Little. And this is the bill that, this broad, sweeping bill that grants healthcare providers, and I mean any healthcare worker at any level of engagement with the public, to deny care based on moral beliefs. So opening the door that LGBTQ Idahoans could be turned away from essential medical services, including emergency care, and especially in rural areas. It creates license to discriminate and could impact the LGBTQ community in a myriad of ways, from HIV prevention to fertility treatments to gender affirming care to antidepressants, and again, even emergency services. And I do think that it is important to also state that this bill is not going to only impact the LGBTQ community, because when discrimination is legalized, it creates a ripple effect that reaches far beyond that community. And in reality, they just make Idaho a less functioning place for everyone, as they erode rights and limit access to essential services in a state where we're already short on providers, where we already have medical deserts. If a doctor or pharmacist can legally discriminate against one group, what's going to stop them from denying care to others?
Misty, it really seems like Idaho is actively moving backwards when it comes to LGBTQ rights. So what protections still exist at this point for LGBTQ people?
Yes, first of all, Idaho is actively attempting to dismantle rights that people have relied on for decades. Fortunately, we still have the Obergefell decision, and marriage equality is still the law of the land. There are some federal protections in employment and housing. However, there are no state protections for the LGBTQ community in either housing, employment, or public accommodations. We've been trying to get that fixed for a good decade and a half. So instead of moving toward fairness and equality, they're trying to revive outdated discriminatory laws. I will say that we have 13 different non-discrimination ordinances in cities across the state, which does mean that folks, probably about a third of the population of Idaho is protected in housing, employment, and public accommodations. And that's an angle we're looking at expanding as we, keep hitting this brick wall with the state.
And how is the LGBTQ community responding to all of these bills and all of these efforts that frankly seem to target them and their ability to exist equally in this state?
Yeah, right now there's a deep and overwhelming sense of fear in the community. And people are scared not just for their rights, but also for their safety, for their families, for their futures in Idaho. Parents are terrified of what these laws mean for their children. Trans Idahoans are wondering if they will have access to healthcare at all, or if they'll be forced to leave the only home they've ever known. Couples are questioning whether their marriages will be recognized, and young queer people are being sent devastating messages that their state doesn't want them here. But I have to say that alongside that, there is also resilience. And the one thing I know about the queer community is that we show up for each other, and we will take care of each other, and we will continue to take care of each other, because it's not just about fighting bad bills. It's about fighting for our right to exist and to love and thrive in the place that we all call home. And it's really about like making it through this moment in time that we know is like really tough and that cannot be overstated, but also in the hope that there's going to be a better tomorrow. And we're going to keep fighting to make sure that future generations of LGBTQ Idahoans don't have to live with this fear.
And how can allies and even just the broader community support LGBTQ Idahoans right now?
Allies have a crucial role to play in pushing back against this wave of discrimination. And we can't have allies be on the sidelines, being silent. All that does is enable the harm that's being done. So my three things are show up, speak out, and support organizations. So show up because your presence matters. Having these extreme legislators see the opposition to these attacks is broad and strong is so, so important. And so showing up at rallies and town halls and public events and hearings and at the State House, all of that is so important right now to have our allies joining us in. And then speaking out in conversations everywhere, right? Conversations change minds. And so people talking with others in their workplaces and in schools and faith communities and around the dinner table, challenging misinformation when you hear it, pushing back against bigoted rhetoric. If you hear someone dismissing these attacks as not a big deal, explain why they are and make it clear that hate does not represent Idaho. We represent Idaho. And then support LGBTQ plus organizations and organizations doing that work. The people on the front lines of this fight need resources to keep going. So donate to local LGBTQ organizations, volunteer your time, help them amplify their work. And I really feel like it's not just a fight. I mean, this is a fight for the LGBTQ community's future, but I also feel like it's a fight for like the soul of our state right now. And when allies come together with us, it makes all of us stronger.
Misty, the legislative session, unfortunately, is not over yet. So is there anything else that Idahoans need to be focused on or aware of?
Yes. So the big bills we're still fighting are the bathroom and facilities bounty ban. That facilities bill is HB 264. The Baby Olivia bill that forces anti-abortion and anti-science propaganda into our schools. We are asking Governor Little to veto that bill. That's SB 1046. The bill that expands our indecent exposure statute to specifically target trans people, HB 270. And then I just heard as we were in this interview that HB 352 passed the Senate. And that is a bill that disallows any LGBTQ content in grades K through 12. In history class, talking about Harvey Milk or Alan Turing or Sally Ride being the first lesbian in space. I mean, the ripple effects of not being able to have that content in schools is a big one. So I would say today's a real rough day for the LGBTQ community. Definitely check in on your loved ones and make sure they know you're there and helping in the fight.
Misty, thank you so much. I know that this is such a busy time of year for you. You've got a lot of hats on right now, a lot of things that you are working on. So thank you so much for taking the time to break down what is happening and really give us a little insight into how it is impacting Idahoans.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity. I love your show, and I know that it will get out to the right ears of people who need to hear what's happening and what they can do to help.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you found this episode informative and important, please tell your friends about the show. We'll be back tomorrow morning with our Friday News Roundup. See you then.